Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming back to the Citrine Path. Today, again, we have myself, Amber, and my amazing co-host.
And I'm Patsy from Violet Elements. Before we get started here, we just want to share real quick that this is our journeys and our guest journey on their spiritual life and their herbal life. So, everything we talk about here, we do recommend you do your own research and definitely talk to your provider before you start any herbal remedies or home remedies.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Citrine Path. So, this one I'm super excited to talk about. We're going to be talking about our hair and how it has a connection to spirituality and even how it connects into our own bodies. How you doing this morning, Mama?
I'm here. Yeah, of course, we were talking about this last night and decided to change up what we were going to do today. So, of course, I stayed up way too late last night reading all the things. Um, because, of course, you read one thing and then it mentions something else. And then I had to go read that and then so on. But I made notes on my phone. So we'll see how we do getting through that.
We're so much alike, it cracks me up because I was up until like 1 this morning and had to be up at 4. So, yeah, I got coffee. It's okay though. But yeah, I did the same thing. I would like read one thing and then I had to go research and see if that's true. And then it turned out it wasn't true. I'm like, okay, well, then how can I prove the other half of this argument? It was, yeah, it was cool though. I found out a lot of really cool information.
So I'm curious now that you mentioned it, yeah, talk about it. Um, so what was it that you found that you thought was interesting, but then when you looked into it, you couldn't find anything to verify it?
So, I was researching about like how our hair connects to our nervous system. And one source I was reading claimed that your hair is magnetic. So then the example they used to prove that it was magnetic is like when you take a balloon and rub it on your shirt and then pull it up to your hair and the static electricity makes your hair stick to the balloon.
Mm,
But then that didn't make sense to me because it can stick to a wall and a chair and other materials that obviously aren't magnetic. So then I was researching to see like a way that we could prove that it was or see if it even was magnetic. And it turns out I found a study that was done back in 1980 that showed when you slightly, like when you press on the scalp of your hair actually does put off a one-sided magnetic field. So they took like little teeny tiny iron particles. And when they pressed on the hair would then push those particles away from your body. So instead of it having a repelling or like, yeah, it has a repelling magnetic um, force to it.
okay, so instead of being magnetic where it's attracting something to it, like they were talking about in the original study you found, it showed that it was almost like a magnetic burst that pushed whatever they're away.
Yeah. So
Interesting.
then they also like looked at it from a physics standpoint, and some of it was over my head. I couldn't quite grasp all of the information. But they were talking about in physics, the sign of light is proof of a magnetic force of some sort. So they took like rat hair and pressed on the rat hair, and there would be like bursts of light. And when there was bursts of light, it would push particles out of its way. And then they did it with human hair, and it did the same thing. So you can look online and you can actually find the pictures they took from the study, and it looks like little tiny lines that are coming off of the hair follicle, and those are little itty bitty flashes of light that they caught.
Interesting. Well, I guess in a way very dumbed down because again, not a scientist. It makes sense because energy cannot go away. It can only be transferred or changed. So, in theory, if you're using the energy and the friction of squeezing it, that energy has to go somewhere or change. So that makes sense, especially with the whole friction, that's energy. Um, I could see like it makes sense that it would change into a burst of light or a magnetic force of energy um, because of the squeezing. Interesting.
Yeah, no, I thought it was super interesting also. And then it made me think like a lot of religions say like your head has to be covered to pray. Um, because it protects you from like to protect you from the outside world. So in some of those religions, I don't know them like word for word or anything like that. This is just from what I've seen over the years. Um, Women's hair can sometimes act as the covering for their prayers, which I think is kind of interesting. If your hair is a repelling element, then it would kind of like repel everything away from them.
Yeah, I know in a lot of Jewish cultures, um, and of course the same thing. Like I know very little about it, um, but I do know there's different practicing that could go on to it within it. But there's a like a division of them that the women wear wigs, and I didn't realize that. And a lot of them, their wigs look very similar to their regular hair. Um, and I found that really interesting. So I didn't look at it this time, but there's a Jewish family that travels all over the world that most people have probably seen that's on social media. Um, and so it's been really interesting following them because there's a lot of things they look like are really good about teaching. But they'll ask other people questions. Like they'll run into people that are clearly religious. Like they'll go to the one of them was they went to the ocean and you could tell by the garments and stuff that other people were wearing that their traditions and religious beliefs were similar to theirs. And so they went and asked them questions like, "Hey, this is who I am. This is our religion. This is what we do. I'm curious because if you're wearing this, what's your guys's?" And so it's really interesting because they not only share their stuff, but other people's stuff that they come across and run into and have questions about. So,
That is
but
super
yeah, I
cool.
didn't realize until starting watching them that because I knew the men wear the covering, and I apologize, I don't remember what it's called, but they wear the little thing, or some of them wear, like, full-on hats, um, but yeah, I didn't realize the women covered their hair either.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting. Originally, how I got started on this topic was I was looking at how Native Americans' connection to their hair is. Native American, so some tribes, I mean, every tribe's going to be different. It's just like every country is going to be different. But pretty commonly, Native Americans have longer hair because it helps them connect to their intuition and helps them connect to the world around them. Then I started looking into why does this help your intuition and how does it connect you like that? So at the end of each hair follicle, there's actually nerves that connect to the hair and they wrap around the bulb of the hair follicle. So anytime that your each individual hair moves, you can feel it being touched or pulled or feel the wind blowing it. Um, and it's even been found that one hair follicle on your head has a higher percentage of touch receptors than any similar skin cells. So you're like, I think it's interesting to think like how light you can touch your skin and feel it, and your hair is more sensitive than that.
Wow, that is interesting.
Yeah, your hair is actually made up of three main things: creatine, sulfur, and silicon. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So this act like it explains how your hair can act as a receptor because it holds the greatest amount of silicon in our body. And silicon is often called the feeling element due to the fact that silicon is what our body uses to transmit messages from the nervous system to our spinal.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. So literally the element that our body communicates with within itself is what our hair is made up of. So like I think that's interesting to think about how sensitive is this element to receiving energy and electrical charges through, because that's how our body communicates with each other, is through electrical surges. So how sensitive is your hair to pick up on that kind of stuff? Like when you walk underneath a power line, always remembered as a kid, our head would feel tingly. So I just think that's really, really interesting to think about.
Yeah, yeah, about the power lines, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so kinda on the same thing, I read this whole article and went down this rabbit hole of, like, the length of your hair, and so, um, one guy and he is indigenous, it didn't really say, like, what tribe he was with, but he did a whole thing on just, like, the spiritual part of cutting your hair, um and so his big thing was that he was talking about how it's kinda like the same thing, like, your hair is your antenna, and depending on, like, how much you need is how long your hair will grow. So, you hear a lot of people that will say, like, "Oh, my hair only grows to here and it stops, and I can't get it to grow past this length." So, his theory is that your natural hair, so, like, natural hair care, letting it grow, not cutting it, not even cutting split ends because that even counts. So just a trim is still in this theory damaging your antenna. Like you're still cutting that end. Um, but the length is specific to each person. So your hair will grow to the length that that person needs. So by cutting your hair, you're interrupting that flow of, like, how much your body needs. And it says that it physically impacts everybody different because everybody's body is different. So your energy requirements is different per each person, and your spiritual beliefs, powers, and insight, so, like, your intuition per se, is gonna be different for every person. So your hair length will grow to its requirement to fulfill that.
That's really cool. That's really interesting to think about because, like, yeah, I know people all the time that want to talk about they want their hair to be this long and they take all these vitamins and put all these oils in it and it just won't grow. But that's an interesting, like, that's super interesting to think that your hair will only grow as long as you need it to be. Hmm.
Yeah. And he goes on to say that it roughly takes about 3 years for your antenna tip, so, like, the ends of your hair, to, like, heal and, like, recharge. So every time you would trim your hair, it would take 3 years. So most people get their hair cut, depending on the style of their hair, like 6 to 8 weeks. So in his theory, you're just, like, redoing it over and over and over again. And I've made a note of this, and of course, I'm probably not gonna be able to find it right now, but he goes on to talk about how, like, in general, and this is kind of funny, and I don't wanna offend anybody that has a Karen haircut or his name is Karen, but he goes on to say, like, most people that you know that have long hair are usually more, like, hippie-ish, more outgoing, go with the flow, like, high vibe personalities. Like, if you think about it, like, the skateboarders, the surfers, like, that hairstyle, they had longer hair, um, and it's because that their hair is long is his theory that it changes your energy and all that stuff and your antennas, so you're, like, in tuned a little bit more, um, so you usually have a more chill personality versus somebody that has short hair or cuts their hair all the time is gonna be a little bit more on edge, and so then that whole Karen theory thing, like, popped into my head so again, I don't wanna offend anybody, but I just thought it was interesting that he talked about that.
That is super interesting. Yeah, I mean that's 100% right. Like, because I don't think I've really met too many people that have long hair that are just like, I don't want to be around him. Um, that's super, super cool. Yeah, and I also watched a video of, I don't remember what tribe it was. It was a tribal elder, and he was talking about when they were kids and they would cut their hair because like when they had to go to like refinery school, I think is, yeah. So they were forced to cut all their hair off. So they would cut their hair at home, and they said that they would cut off their braid and then they would take a hot rock and run the end on a hot rock to seal the medicine into their braid. So even though it was cut off, the kids would then have their braid and would like do ceremonies and stuff with it to try and still pull some of that medicine out of it. I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, like, kinda like searing the wound
Yeah, exactly. And those
or
are like words.
cauterizing it.
Yeah, and those are exact words that he said too. Like cauterizing a wound is trying to hold it in.
That's interesting. I was trying to find, they were talking I found another one and they were talking about, um, how you wear your hair changes, and my notes are all over the place. Um, but so he was talking about, um, and this was a philosopher, that, did I write down where he originated from? He was not originally from America, but moved here, and then had really long hair, and then was kinda shocked by the culture that most people here at the time when he moved here did not have long hair. Like, that was not the norm for men to have long hair. Um, but he goes on to talk about how, like, you shouldn't put your hair up when it's wet because when it's wet, it will, like, help absorb, like, the sun and the vitamin D and the energy from that if you leave it down and let it dry naturally, but then putting it up when it's wet because your hair shrinks, expands, retracts, all that when it dries, that it's gonna cause breakage and more damage to your hair, um, and then could lead to you cutting it and, like, so on and so on. So he kinda had his culture kinda had the same belief about you don't cut your hair. Um, his hair was extremely long. But he talks about how it's best to coil your hair onto the top of your head and kind of like how you were talking about the covering, and cover it to help protect it so that it didn't get damaged, but to leave your hair down at night so you were more in tune to what was going on around you and more in tune to the environment. So, like, your spidey sense was a little bit more activated while you were sleeping.
That's really interesting. I never thought
Yeah.
about that because I've always heard you should sleep with your hair like up, or like we always used to braid my hair when I was a kid when I went to sleep, to help protect it so you didn't rub it on the pillow and that way. But that's interesting to think to have more intuition while you're sleeping. I wonder if he has different dreams if his hair's down versus up.
I don't know. That would be interesting. I'll have to look into that. If I'm sure there's something out there, or like even meditating. Like, I wonder if people notice a difference if their hair is up or down when they meditate.
Right? That's, I don't know.
Well, it's like, so squirrel brain. So that reminds me of, and I'm sorry if I pronounce this wrong, but Genghis Khan, who in China that invaded. Okay, you know who I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so um, when he invaded, and I don't know all the stipulations behind it, but he made the women cut their hair to show that they were less than him or and less than his people that he brought in and less of, like, all his wives because he had a gajillion wives and a gajillion kids. And so when they invaded, they would make them cut their hair to show that they were a lesser status, and then he would make them wear bangs to block the third eye.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so it made them block the third eye, so they were, like, basically cut off. So their hair was cut off, so they didn't 'cause the Chinese has a whole thing on long hair also, and so it blocked them off from being in tune to their nature that was around them, their surroundings, and then covered their third eye so they couldn't see what was coming or, um, any of that, which I thought was super interesting that in their culture, just wearing the bangs blocked it off to where they weren't as in tune to it.
That's really interesting. I never heard about that before. I mean, it makes sense why they would have them wear bangs to cut the third eye off. That's really crazy. I'll have to look into that more too. I
Let
think
me
it's
see if
really
I'm gonna see if I
interesting.
can pull it up here. Hmm?
Okay, I think it's really interesting how many different cultures all have like long hair as being a primary part of their cultures. And now there's this research coming out that actually proves that your hair actually does play a role in like your nervous system and how your body can receive messages and stuff from the outside world. I think it's really neat.
Yeah, I read somewhere where it talked about that, and it said that they found that it sends it to a certain part of your brain. If I find it, I'll I'll share it. Um, but here I have some other like quick things that I wrote down. So they were talking about how they feel like your hair absorbs things. Oh, frontal lobe. See, I just have to
Oh,
stop looking for it. So hair acts as an antenna and absorbs energy from the sun and transmits it to your frontal lobe, which is responsible for meditation, visualization, and manifestation practices.
that's neat. And isn't your frontal lobe like your decision making? Or is that a different part?
Mhm, I think so. I think it has to do with like your rational part of it, like knowing from right from wrong or when to stop talking type stuff.
Hmm. But that's interesting. I didn't know like meditation and intuition and stuff came from your frontal lobe also.
Yeah, that's what I wrote down.
That's really cool. I'll have to look into that too. I should start writing down things so I remember.
Well, if you wait until this gets posted, you can just rewatch it.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So another fact I wrote down was that if your hair grows to mature length and it helps process calcium, vitamin D, and phosphates, which enter your body through the ducts located at the top of the top of your scalp, and goes into your body that way. So, like how a lot of people think the pores on your bottom of your feet are bigger, so you could apply stuff to the bottom of your feet and it absorbs into your body faster. This is saying that another quick way to absorb thing is through your scalp, um, which made a lot of sense to me because I know if I don't use a high quality, natural, pure, non toxic shampoo, I get little like bumps and blisters on my head almost immediately. Um, so I know like I know the top of your scalp is sensitive. You would think that well, I thought that it wouldn't be because you're always like doing stuff with it and touching it and your hair's pulling on it and all that. But
That's really cool. I mean, it makes sense because you have like a sweat gland, I think, in between every two hair follicles or something like that. Like, there's a lot of sweat glands just on your scalp. So, all of those would be areas to get into your bloodstream. And even at the bottom of your hair follicle goes straight into your bloodstream, each individual hair. So, that's super, super interesting. It makes me think back when I was a kid of all like the hair gel and treatments and like heat protectant stuff I used to spray on it, how much of that was really playing a role in my health.
yeah, like I have noticed. So with my locks in, I don't wash my hair as frequently, but I don't have to. Like my scalp is a lot better. Like it's not all dry and weird like it used to be. Um, my hair grows so much faster. And I, also use a shampoo and conditioner that has fermented rice water and rosemary in it, which are both known to strengthen hair and stimulate hair growth. So with that and with my dreads, man, it grows so fast. So even without my dreads on the side of my head, I have to shave it like maybe I can get 2 weeks out of it. And it's like a good length by the time I finally give up and shave it. Um, and like I redo my dreads every time they grow out to move them down. So my dreads next technically don't get longer like yours, but yeah, it's made a huge difference. And but my hair is, I would say, healthier now than it's ever been. And I took my dreads out since I put them in one time, and they were out for about 20 or 30 minutes. And I just felt so weird and off that we pulled an all-nighter to put them back in.
That's so funny. Like it always cracks me up when you say that. But I
Yeah, it
mean,
was just
yeah,
super weird.
yeah. And my dreads have done a lot to help my scalp and stuff also. Um, like you don't use product in it. I don't put heat on it anymore. I use Dr. Bronner soap. It's like I know it's super harsh soap, but it's just castor oil with essential oils. Castor soap. Um, but yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's like my light is so bright it like blocks it out. I don't know. I apologize. But
Yeah,
everybody can probably tell like what the bottle is.
yeah.
Yes, this is what I use when I make my dreads. I like
It,
the lemon one.
see, we use lavender.
Mm.
Doesn't it help calm you down when you're taking a shower? Yeah, I just think this is a super interesting topic, and I'm excited for us to be able to dive into it a little bit deeper in the future, even if we don't do a podcast on it. I definitely am sucked into this rabbit hole.
Yeah, now that you just mentioned the baiting part of it, it reminded me. I read so many articles and I just like took like clip, like jotted down little things in here. Um, but it's like all just randomly plugged in here. But I did see somewhere where they were talking about showering and washing your hair, and that it's more of a ritual in itself, like the whole concept of it. So they were talking about how, like, what it does, like it cleanses your body and renews it and removes the impurities. And so it's like just taking a regular shower and a bath is very ritualistic. Um, and like back in the days, they would do like the bathhouses and go, and it was very like ceremonious. Um, but yeah, I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah, no, it's super, super interesting. And um, water is actually one way of cleansing. So taking a shower or a bath or going swimming in a lake or whatever um, can be very ritualistic and have a lot of connection to like your spirituality and cleansing your body and stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, man, we didn't even talk about like probably the most famous person with the hair was Samson and Delilah.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about
Did
that.
I
But
know
yeah,
you probably know it because I talk about it a lot, but how his power was connected to his hair, and his enemies hired Delilah as a spy to sneak in and cut his hair so they can capture him and turn him into a slave. And they actually ended up taking out his eyeballs, which I'm not sure why they did that. But yeah, they cut his hair, took out his eyeballs. And so a lot of times when you see him, he has the a covering tied around his face. If you look up like impictions of him. And then they put him to work in as a slave in the mine in a mill.
Yeah, I
and
never
that's
knew.
how his enemies defeated him.
That's crazy. I never knew that they took his eyeballs out. That makes so much sense. Because you're right, he always has that cloth over his eyes.
Yeah, they removed his eyes, so they made him weak and blind.
Wow.
Yeah.
Huh. That's really cool. I didn't. Hmm. Um, and wasn't he like invincible when his hair was long?
Yeah, he had, like, super strength. Um, so I wanna say I think they sainted him, but I'm not 100% sure on that. Um, but it's very similar stories to, like, Thor. He had, like, superpower, super strong, and so when they kept trying to like, his enemies would attack, he was like 10 men in 1, and so they could never defeat him or take over his village and stuff, and so that's why they had Delilah cut his hair.
Wow. That's crazy. Hmm. All right, everybody. Well, these are so many different ways our hair connects to different cultures and how it connects to our body. I hope this was kind of intriguing and sparked some ideas for you guys. I know it definitely did for me. So I can't wait to see what we're going to talk about next time. And thank you so much for joining us and being here for this week's episode. Bye. Remember, we do not treat, cure, or diagnose any illness. So if you have any questions about anything we talked about today, please reach out to your provider.
So we are always so honored and blessed that you spent your time with us, and we can't wait to visit with you next time. So please come back and visit us, but until then, go forth with love and intention.